Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're here.
Yeah, really glad to have you with us.
Because whether you're, prepping for a huge management meeting tomorrow, or maybe you're trying to figure out the invisible mechanics behind your own gig work side hustle,
Right?
or honestly, if you're just insanely curious about where all this workplace tech is actually taking us, you are exactly where you need to be.
It's a lot to process. I mean, the information overload out there is just relentless.
It really is.
So,
So the goal today is to cut right through that noise. We're going to pull out the essential, actionable insights that you can actually use.
yeah, because it really is a jungle out there when you try to figure out the future of work. And the topic we're diving into today is just incredibly universal.
Completely universal.
It touches virtually every single person who, goes to work, logs into a system, or opens an app to earn a living.
That is no exaggeration.
Yeah.
So to get to the bottom of this, we are unpacking a really fascinating line of research by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover.
Great research.
It's all about why work design matters more than ever in a digital world. And the mission for this conversation is, well, it's pretty bold.
We like bold.
We want to completely shatter a massive, widespread myth. It's this idea that technology's impact on our jobs is some kind of predetermined destiny.
Oh, the narratives are everywhere. It's either going to be this techno-utopia where we all just sit on the beach while algorithms do the heavy lifting,
Right.
or it's a total job apocalypse where the robots just replace us all.
Exactly. But when you look at the actual data, it becomes really clear that how technology changes our work isn't a destiny at all. It is entirely a result of human design choices.
And that is the crucial shift in perspective. What's fascinating here is that we are at a really critical inflection point right now. I mean, artificial intelligence, collaborative robots, the ones they call cobots.
Yeah, cobalt.
And these incredibly complex algorithms, they're no longer just confined to auto manufacturing floors. They have moved straight into knowledge work. We're talking about hospitals, law firms, remote home offices. Literally no sector is untouched.
Every industry.
But the core paradox here, and this is the main takeaway, the exact same piece of software or machinery can either completely empower a worker to do their best work, or it can entirely strip away their professional autonomy.
Depending on the design.
Right. It all depends on how the organization actually chooses to implement it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the research lays out two fundamentally different philosophies for bringing tech into a workplace, right? You've got the automate strategy, and then there's the inform it strategy.
Exactly.
Now, the automate route is exactly what it sounds like, using tech to just replace human effort wherever possible. But informing it, that's a totally different beast.
It is. The informant strategy is all about using technology to generate data and surface insights that actively empower human decision-making.
Helping humans decide, not deciding for them.
Exactly. But what happens in a lot of organizations is that leadership, well, they get starry-eyed about a new piece of tech.
Oh, the shiny new toy syndrome.
Right. They want maximum efficiency immediately, so they blindly choose the automate route. And when they do that, they fall into this trap that systems engineers call leftover function allocation.
Okay, leftover function allocation. I mean, that sounds like something buried in a highly dense engineering manual.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like for a normal person on the job?
Well, it essentially means the system designers look at a workflow and they say, let's automate every single thing the machine can possibly handle.
Give the machine the good stuff.
Yeah, they give the machine the core work, and then whatever tasks are just too ambiguous or too complex or frankly just too annoying to automate, they gather up those leftover pieces and just toss them to the human worker.
So the human is basically just the glue holding the automated processes together.
That's it. You're the glue. And it creates genuinely terrible jobs. I mean, instead of being an active participant in your work, you're reduced to a passive monitor. You're essentially just babysitting a computer screen, waiting for something to flash red.
I feel like we can all relate to that on a micro level. Just think about relying on GPS navigation.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. Because 10 years ago, if I drove to a new part of my city, I had to actively pay attention to landmarks, street names, the general direction I was heading. I was engaged in the process of navigating.
You were in the loop.
I was in the loop. But now, I just plug the address into my phone, completely zone out, and blindly follow the blue line. And if my phone battery dies halfway there,
You're completely lost.
I have zero situational awareness. I'm lost in my own neighborhood.
That is a brilliant everyday analogy for exactly what happens in highly technical environments. And it perfectly illustrates what the researchers call the out-of-the-loop problem.
The out-of-the-loop problem.
Yeah, and the stakes get incredibly high. Take the aviation industry, for example. Modern commercial airplanes are equipped with unbelievably advanced autopilot systems. They can handle almost all the complex minute-to-minute tasks of flying a plane from point A to point B.
Which, I mean, sounds great for safety, right? The computer doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted.
On paper, yes,
Hmm.
it sounds perfect. But because the autopilot is doing so much, the pilots effectively transform from active flyers into those passive supervisory controllers we just talked about.
Just babysitting the screen.
Right. They are sitting there monitoring the systems, and because they're just watching the automation, they lack continuous hands-on practice. Over years of flying, their raw manual flying skills inevitably start to deteriorate.
Because they just aren't exercising that muscle anymore.
Precisely. So what happens when a sensor freezes over or the automation suddenly fails? Which, technology sometimes does.
It definitely does.
The pilots are suddenly thrust back into the loop, but because they haven't been actively engaged in the flying process, they completely lack the immediate situational awareness to jump in, assess the crisis, and save the day. And it has tragically led to severe accidents. And I would actually encourage you, listening right now, to think about your own daily workflow. Are there software systems or automated tools you rely on every day that are making you so passive that you might actually be quietly losing your core professional skills?
That is a terrifying question to ask yourself, but a really necessary one. And it's not just happening in the cockpit. Here's where it gets really interesting. We see this exact same out-of-the-loop problem cropping up in fields where the stakes are literal life and death.
Like healthcare.
Like modern healthcare, specifically robotic surgery. Yeah. If you walk into a cutting-edge operating room today, you might see a Da Vinci surgical robot.
An incredible marvel of medical tech.
It is. It provides surgeons with immensely magnified 3D visualization of the surgical site, and it allows for these remarkably precise microscopic movements that a human hand could just never achieve alone.
It's a phenomenal tool. But when we look at how it was integrated into teaching hospitals, we see a massive unintended ripple effect. Historically, the way medical residents learned how to do complex surgeries was through a model of guided practice. They would stand next to the attending surgeon, take on small parts of the procedure, and gradually take on more and more responsibility under strict supervision.
The classic apprenticeship model. See one, do one, teach one.
Exactly. But the Da Vinci robot completely disrupted that because the robot requires such specific, delicate operation at a single console, and because modern hospitals are under immense pressure regarding both efficiency and liability.
The attending surgeons just took over.
Yes, they started doing all the critical steps of the surgeries themselves.
Which, makes sense from a short-term risk perspective, right? If the attending surgeon can do it faster and seemingly safer using the robot, why would they pass the controls over to a resident who is still learning?
It makes total sense for that specific surgery on that specific day. But the long-term consequence is staggering. We now have a situation where medical residents are graduating from their surgical programs, and they are legally authorized to use these advanced robots.
But they've never practiced.
Right. Because the actual work design was completely optimized around the machine's efficiency and the attending surgeon's speed, these new doctors never got the actual experiential, hands-on learning required to operate those robots safely on their own.
That is wild. Yeah. So the technology itself is brilliant, but the way the workflow was designed around it completely failed the next generation of human learners.
That is the core issue. The tech was implemented to automate and expedite the physical process of surgery, but it totally ignored the social process of medical training.
Okay, so we've seen how physical automation changes the nature of work for pilots and surgeons. But what about software? What happens when it's an algorithm dictating the workflow rather than a physical machine?
That's where things get really insidious.
Yeah, there's an example in the research involving regional home care nurses that I just found deeply unsettling. These are highly trained, specialized professionals who travel from house to house treating patients. And a health network decided to give them all a new tablet-based scheduling algorithm that automatically mapped out their entire day.
And ostensibly, the pitch for that software is always about making things easier. We're going to optimize your route. We're going to save you driving time.
Right. And efficiency is generally a good thing in healthcare if it means you can see more patients who need help. But how did it actually play out on the ground?
It was an absolute disaster for the nurse's autonomy.
Oh, so.
The algorithm optimized purely for time and geography. Its rigid, minute-by-minute allocations completely stripped the nurses of their professional judgment. Think about it. A nurse might walk into a patient's home, assess the situation, and realize this person is in serious, unexpected distress and needs at least an hour of dedicated care and stabilization.
But the tablet algorithm doesn't know the patient is in distress. It just knows that the nurse is scheduled to be at the next house in exactly 20 minutes.
Exactly. And the system tracks their location and punishes them for deviating from the schedule. So these highly empathetic, skilled professionals were put in an impossible bind. To maintain their ethical standard of care, the nurses were forced to either cut some visits dangerously short, just to make up time, or they had to work completely unpaid hours at the end of their shift to give certain vulnerable patients the attention they actually required.
That is a perfect example of a system measuring compliance to a metric, rather than the actual quality of the mission. The algorithm became the manager, and it was a terrible manager.
It was. And that rigidity isn't just a problem in specialized fields like nursing. We see this exact same dynamic, this illusion of control, every single time we order takeout or call a rideshare. Let's look at the gig economy.
Yes. The gig economy is so fascinating because it touches almost everyone's daily life. The entire marketing pitch for platforms like Uber, Lyft, or DoorDash is ultimate boundary control. The slogan is always some variation of be your own boss, work when you want, where you want, for as long as you want.
It sounds like the absolute pinnacle of worker autonomy. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize that flexibility is largely an illusion, particularly for precarious workers who rely on that income to survive.
Because there's no actual human boss.
Right, because there is no human manager standing over your shoulder, the platform relies on what researchers call soft controls to manage the workforce.
Because the platform still needs reliability. It needs to know there will be drivers on the road at 5:00 p.m. when everyone leaves the office. So how does it guarantee that without explicitly scheduling them?
It uses the algorithm to heavily nudge and honestly sometimes manipulate human behavior.
Yeah.
It uses dynamic surge pricing to financially pressure workers into logging on during certain hours.
Ah, right.
It forces blind ride acceptances, where a driver has a matter of seconds to accept a job without knowing exactly where they are going or the full breakdown of what they'll be paid. And it uses pushy, gamified messaging.
It's like those pop-ups.
Yes. If a driver tries to log off to go home to their family, the app might pop up a bright red notification saying, "Demand is very high right now in your area. Are you sure you want to stop? You're only $10 away from your goal."
It's engineering human behavior through software.
Yep.
And there's a specific dynamic with food delivery riders that really highlights this. Technically, under the terms of service, these riders are independent contractors. They are free to decline any order they don't want to take. If a delivery is too far or the restaurant's known to be slow, they can say no.
But they can't really say no without consequences.
Right.
If a rider exercises that supposed freedom and declines too many orders, their acceptance rate drops, and the algorithm heavily penalizes them for that. Eventually, the app will just silently block them from logging into the preferred high-paying delivery zones. It is essentially a behavioral cage built entirely out of code.
A behavioral cage. That is a really heavy phrase, but it perfectly describes the feeling of being hyper-monitored but completely unsupported,
Yeah.
which leads to this very modern phenomenon that the research terms algorithmic isolation.
Algorithmic isolation is one of the most psychologically damaging aspects of this kind of work design. Imagine you are a gig worker. You're out there grinding, and your app suddenly glitches. Or maybe a passenger gets angry about traffic and decides to give you an unfair, retaliatory 1-star rating.
A rating that could literally threaten your ability to earn a living tomorrow.
Exactly. When that happens in a traditional job, you walk into a manager's office and explain the situation.
You have a human conversation to resolve the context.
Right. But in the platform economy, your only recourse is to submit a ticket to an automated customer support bot. There is a deeply impactful quote from a gig worker in the research that really drives this home. They said, "You email everything, there's no one to talk to. If your app breaks, you just have to wing it."
You just have to wing it. That is incredibly bleak. It really captures the essence of being entirely dependent on a system that doesn't actually see you as a human being.
It does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of dark territory here. We've looked at airplane pilots literally forgetting how to fly, because of passive monitoring. We've seen surgical robots accidentally stealing practice time from the next generation of doctors. We've looked at algorithms turning nurses into compliance machines and gig workers trapped in algorithmic isolation.
It's a lot.
It is. If leftover function allocation is the default and it creates these broken systems, what do we do? So what does this all mean? How do we actually fix this? What is the alternative?
The alternative is actually rooted in a concept from the 1950s, believe it or not. It's called sociotechnical systems theory.
Wait, sociotechnical systems? I have to be honest, that sounds like a buzzword from a dusty corporate management textbook. Does a theory from the 1950s really apply to AI and gig work algorithms today?
It applies more now than ever. The core principle of sociotechnical systems theory is something called joint optimization.
Doing optimization.
Yeah. The fundamental idea is that any workplace, whether it's an accounting firm, a factory floor, or a hospital, is made up of two interlocking systems. You have the technical system, which includes the tools, the software, the machinery, and you have the social system, which is the humans, the workplace culture, the informal communication networks.
So the people and the tools are inextricably linked.
Precisely. And the rule of joint optimization says that you absolutely cannot optimize the technical system while ignoring the human system.
Oh, okay.
If you try to maximize the efficiency of the software without considering how it impacts the humans using it, the whole operation will eventually fall apart. You have to design and optimize both systems together simultaneously.
That makes intuitive sense. It's a true partnership between the human and the machine. And to actually achieve that partnership, the research argues that organizations need to shift their focus away from substitution, just replacing human labor, and move toward a concept called complementarity.
Yes.
Let machines be machines and let humans be humans.
That is the perfect way to summarize complementarity. It's about recognizing the unique strengths of both sides. Machines and algorithms are unparalleled at precision, calculation speed, and relentless consistency. They don't get bored scanning thousands of spreadsheets.
Right.
But humans, we are uniquely capable of pattern recognition in novel, unexpected contexts. We do complex moral reasoning. We engage in empathetic communication like those home care nurses needed to do. We should never be designing systems that treat human beings as mere gap fillers to cover up the flaws in an AI program.
We're not just leftover function allocators.
Exactly. We should be designing roles that elevate those uniquely human traits, using the technology to provide the data we need to make better decisions.
To informate rather than just automate. And there's a really uplifting, concrete success story in the research about a company that actually got this right.
Oh, the chemical plant.
Yeah, it involves a chemical processing plant that was upgrading to advanced process control automation.
This is one of my favorite examples of joint optimization in action. So the plant management brought in engineers to install all these new automated sensors and digital control valves. But instead of the engineers just coming in and unilaterally automating every single dial and switch they could find, they stopped and did something radical.
Which was?
They actually asked the human plant operators for their input. They asked the people doing the work, what parts of this process do you want the machine to handle and what parts do you want to keep?
Which is such a rare level of respect for the worker's expertise. What do the operators decide? Because if I were in their shoes, I might be tempted to say, automate all of it and let me just read a book in the control room.
You'd think so, right? But the operators made an incredibly brilliant strategic choice. They chose to automate the routine, tedious parameter adjustments, the boring, repetitive stuff that required constant, tiny tweaks. But they intentionally chose to maintain manual control over the troubleshooting processes and the variance management.
So whenever the chemical mixture went slightly off spec or something totally unusual happened, the humans were the ones figuring out why and how to fix it.
Exactly. Those are the tasks that require deep situational judgment, historical knowledge of the plant, and active, engaging problem solving. By keeping those tasks, they didn't become passive monitors.
And the results were a massive win across the board. Because they maintained that engaging, meaningful work, the operators reported much higher job satisfaction. They kept their skills sharp, so they were ready if a real emergency happened. And crucially, this is the part that management cares about most. The plant's overall performance and safety metrics actually exceeded expectations when compared to other rival facilities that had chosen to fully automate everything.
That chemical plant is the ultimate proof that the informant strategy isn't just a nice, warm and fuzzy idea for worker morale. It is genuinely better for business. By giving the workers the data from the new sensors, but letting them handle the complex problem solving, both the human system and the technical system thrived.
It really is a total paradigm shift. It proves that we don't have to accept the leftover function trap. So to bring all these threads together for you,
Wow.
we've looked at the very real dangers of autopilot skill rot. We've seen how focusing purely on the efficiency of surgical robots can steal vital practice time from medical students.
Right.
We've unpacked the invisible behavioral cages and the algorithmic isolation built into the gig economy. And finally, we've seen the very hopeful, actionable solution of joint optimization and complementarity.
If there is one central thesis you take away from this deep dive, it should be this. Technology's impact on your daily work is not an inevitable force of nature. It is not something happening to you by some unchangeable law of physics. It is always a choice.
The design choice.
A design choice. We desperately need to advocate for proactive, human-centered work design. We have to prioritize human flourishing, continuous learning, and meaningful connection right alongside pure operational efficiency. They cannot be mutually exclusive.
Absolutely. So whether you are a senior manager deciding which new enterprise software to buy for your department, or you are an employee trying to navigate a new digital workflow your boss just rolled out, remember that you have a voice in how these tools are used. You can advocate for systems that informate and empower your team, rather than accepting systems that blindly automate people into a corner.
And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. It draws on a really empowering concept from the research regarding how we as individuals react to these tools. It's the idea of the psychological contract and something called job crafting.
So hold on, let's unpack those terms before we go. Psychological contract sounds like a pretty heavy concept for just a change in workplace software. What does that actually mean?
It's a great term. A psychological contract refers to the unspoken trust and the unwritten expectations that exist between you and your employer. It's the feeling of, I am trusted as a professional to do my job.
Okay, I get that.
When a new, highly monitoring technology is introduced, like the tablet given to those home care nurses, it doesn't just change their daily tasks, it actually rewrites that psychological contract. Suddenly, you go from being a trusted professional to being a hyper-measured data point. And that shift in trust can be incredibly demoralizing.
I can completely see that. It changes the entire emotional reality of walking into work.
Well,
So if the algorithm breaks that contract, what is job crafting? Is that basically hacking your own job description to get that trust back?
in a way, yes. Job crafting is the recognition that even in highly structured or algorithmically managed environments, workers are not completely powerless. You can actively experiment with these new digital tools. Job crafting is the process of subtly redesigning your own daily tasks, carving out specific intentional spaces to preserve your professional autonomy.
Well, that's fascinating.
It might mean finding workarounds to force human connection with the client, or slightly altering a workflow to ensure you are still finding meaning and using your best skills, even when the software is trying to dictate your entire day.
I love that. It's about reclaiming your humanity within the digital system.
Precisely. So, as you head into work tomorrow or the next time you log into a platform, I want you to ask yourself, when the system tries to put you on autopilot, how will you actively craft your job to stay in the loop?
That is such a powerful and practical question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning the digital world around you, and we will catch you next time.